Right, participation tools. There's a well reused meme in there for you, Simeon. I know you love to see a meme. I'm gonna unfortunately be using a lot of the amusing images and memes from the mid PI review. Okay, so participation tools workstream is part of our Make Adoption Easier pillar. And this is a really, really big contribution to that effort to lower or even remove barriers to participation, not just for adopters and the ecosystem around them with system integrators, but also for DFSPs themselves. Larger DFSPs, big MOMOs, mobile monies, who are used to doing big integration projects. They still suffer from those projects being complex, risky, and time consuming. So this work stream's main objectives are to remove those barriers, not just for the small guys who we want to encourage in our open loop ecosystem, and the medium-sized guys who may not have the same resources and budget available, but also for the bigger guys. We want it to be easy, cheap, low risk for anybody to come and join a modular loop scheme, and for adopters, scheme operators, hub owners, hub operators, to be able to bring people into their schemes. So we're focused in this work stream on building tools to try to lower or even remove those barriers. When I say tools, I don't just mean software tools, pieces of software that you use. I also mean documentation, know-how, business processes that everybody in that ecosystem can use as part of that process of building and growing modular loop schemes. So far, since this work stream was kind of repurposed from previous workstream focused on the particular software tool, the SDK, and we've evolved since then considerably to consider more general requirements across the board. We spent the last few months meeting regularly, a group of product-focused people and engineers to rethink from first principles what we should be doing in the modular loop ecosystem to encourage the growth of modular loop schemes. So far, we have discussed and captured quite a number of high-level requirements. We're in the process of actively refining those requirements and breaking them down into smaller deliverable chunks of work. So to that end, we're building a backlog in GitHub, ZenHub, with work items that we're hoping to find resource to implement. We have been very resource constrained. We haven't had much engineering support to actually deliver software. So far, our efforts have been limited to documentation, but we've had a considerable amount of thought leadership from the product-focused people in the ecosystem. So I'm quite happy right now that we have a good handle on the scope of work that needs to be done to get us to the next stage in encouraging that ecosystem and around growing modular loop schemes. But I will be calling for help and support from anybody in the ecosystem who's willing to devote time to this. It's a particularly interesting part of the ecosystem, I think, for businesses. I think none of us are under any illusions that for our financial inclusion goals to be met, we have to enable and foster viable business models. in and around Loop and its use in national payment systems. Participation tools and helping people join, operate Loop schemes and take part in and understand how to participate in these schemes. That's a very fertile area, I think, for business models to be developed. So please come and talk to us in the Workstream about what you can do to join or increase your participation in that part of the ecosystem. I think it will be fertile ground. So we have had some engineering support from one of the interns who's come to the Loop ecosystem. So Devash has been working on a couple of things for us in this workstream to improve some of our software tooling support. This is kind of our first step towards ramping up the engineering efforts that are going on in this area. So I'll let Devash present and tell you about what he's been doing before I come back and tell you a bit more about what we're hoping to achieve in PI25. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Devash, are you ready?
Yeah, James.
Okay, over to you.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Devash Shah, and let me share my screen and start what I want to say. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, James. Firstly, let me start with who am I? I am Devash Shah, and currently I am contributing to participation tools and in participation tools, and that's all. And by through this mentoring program and under the mentorship of Sam sir. Now let me start with what we had done till now and what we are planning to do in the next 1 month or 1.5 months. So this is the issues. This is the issue in which we are currently we are working on. So this is the list of tasks in which we have specified that what we have achieved and what we are seeking to achieve, means what we are planning to do now. Without any further ado, let me get started with what we had done, what we have achieved till now. Okay, so in core test harness, what we have done is that we have manipulated this code Docker Compose file. In Docker Compose file, specifically in this TTK provisioning container, what we have done is that earlier it was a referring to this provisioning folder and default env.json folder, JSON file. So as we can see in this provisioning folder, there are multiple FSPs which was taking time to generate the final report. And so what we had done is that we filtered out some required FSPs and told the Docker Compose file in TTK provisioning that you should refer provisioning one directory in which we have this required FSPs to boot up. And similarly, in default env.json, earlier it was referring to this IDs, addresses, and endpoints. So I have created this another JSON file in which I have removed them and specified here that please refer to this docker env1.json file. Now, what it is doing is that earlier it was taking around 150 seconds, and now it takes around 55 seconds. So this change we had noticed. This change we have noticed, and that one thing we had done. And in readme file, one simple thing I had done is that instead of writing this whole Docker Compose file and telling Docker Compose file that please consider all services profile, please consider TTK provisioning for profile and TTK test profile, just now the user just have to write, user means the developer just have to write this profile simple. So I have introduced this simple profile everywhere so that whenever we boot up this command, we write this command, our objective that is to run the TTK, means the testing toolkit locally will be implemented, and we will see the UI of testing toolkit, and we can do the transactions we want in less time. So this is how we have increased the efficiency and achieved one target. Now, what we are planning to do in next 1 month is like to work on the mini loop. What we will do in mini loop is that we will upgrade all the dependencies and basically we will upgrade the mini loop tool and to its latest version. This one thing. Another thing we will do is that to work on the we will look on the finance portal to put test harness, and finally we will work on the infrastructure as code part so that we can provision the infrastructure by writing the code. So this is what we had manifested, we had thought to achieve, and that's all from my side. If there's any problem or any mistake done by me, it's completely mine. So thank you everyone
Thank you,
for listening
Divan.
me.
Thank
And
you. Thank you.
thank you, James, for
Just
giving me this chance.
yeah, one additional piece of context there. So the work that Devash has been doing contributes to the DFSP onboarding flow. So during a DFSP onboarding, there's a number of tests that have to be run to prove the connection between the core banking system of a DFSP or whatever core backend they might have, and the modular loop hub operating at the center of the scheme. So this work was optimizing that process, and as you can see, a significant reduction in the time taken to execute those tests has been achieved. So that's great work. Thank you very much, Devash.
Thank you.
All right, let
Should
me.
I
Yeah, let
stop
me.
sharing my screen?
Yes, please. Yeah, let me go back to my deck. Just before I move on, does anybody have any questions at this point? I'll just have a quick look at the chat. Not seeing anything in the chat. Anybody want to raise a hand and ask any questions before I move on? Okay, all good. Right, so moving on then. What are we going to focus on for the next PI? Well, in this past PI, in PI 24, most of our work has been thought work and documentation. In the next PI, we want to make some measurable impact in producing some deliverables. The most important thing on our stack that we think is priority one for us right now is reducing the infrastructure requirements for running an SDK-based integration layer at DFSP. So given the current landscape of tooling and the adoption projects that are coming up, and the integration architectures that our adopters are talking to us about, the smaller DFSPs and during the early test and pilot phases of scheme operation, SDK-based integration seem to be a starting point, a default starting point for a great number of people. So looking at the SDK, what's currently called the SDK scheme adapter, over the years, that has increased its feature capability. We've added a lot of features and capabilities to handle things like bulk transfers for things like G2P disbursements. That's introduced additional components into that environment and additional hardware requirements and resource requirements that mean it's no longer really suitable for running on small, low-end, cheap hardware at a DFSP. The kind of thing that might run under somebody's desk or in a small data center or in a broom cupboard type server room. So we want to put some effort in to break that component up into smaller chunks. So our small DFSPs can more rapidly and cheaply, for a lower risk, lower investment, onboard to a modular loop scheme, possibly just supporting some very basic use cases to start with, some P2B, B2P, P2P type transfer scenarios, but without all the additional overhead of the more complex use cases like PISP or the third-party payment initiation, or like I say, the bulk transfers, which have an additional hardware requirement. Right now, you can't deploy those separately. When you deploy the SDK scheme adapter, you have to deploy the whole set. And right now, it's 5 or 6 Docker containers, some of which can hog resources quite intensely during, for example, a bulk transfer process. So we're going to spend some time and effort trying to break those up into smaller chunks that can be deployed independently. We want to do that in such a way that increasing the capability of your integration to a modular scheme isn't hard and doesn't require complete re-engineering or rethinking or redeployment, but that you can add capability and features in small chunks as you want it. So that's where we'll be focusing the bulk of our effort in the next month to 6 weeks. Further to that, as our secondary priority, we're thinking more about facilitating low-code integrations with DFSP backends. Some of the requirements that fell out during the past PI were around the actual technical work that's required to do an integration. With the SDK scheme adapter as it stands, there's typically some software engineering work required, which historically has been coding. So a DFSP would either have to employ a software engineer or hire a system integrator to do that. We'd like to reduce the need and the requirement and the required skill level, and hence the cost and possibly risk of performing those integrations. So in the ecosystem, there have been some low-code solutions already that have been used in a few modular deployments using a technology stack called Apache Camel. There's a catalog of Apache Camel-based glue layers between SDK scheme adapter and some common off-the-shelf open source core banking systems. We'd like to try to bring those into play. Again, to try to reduce the time and cost and risk of integrating with Moduloop. We don't want to be reinventing the wheel. We don't want to be building our own low-code platform, for example. So using off-the-shelf open source components that match our license requirements seems to make a lot of sense. And there's been a lot of effort put into that in some of the implementation projects that we'd really like to bring home to roost in the Moduloop code repositories. So we'll be working towards that. Another really interesting area of focus that I think is worthy of some attention is the non-software based tooling and documentation around integrating. So we've had some discussions in the workstream about what we could do to provide off-the-shelf processes, off-the-shelf documentation that will remove workload and eliminate risk. So following best practice, what kind of process would you go through if you were a skilled and experienced system integrator? What process would you follow to connect a core banking system into a Moduloop scheme? Can we make that a generic process? Can we codify that in documentation? Can we have some nice, easy to follow process flows with appropriate sign-offs and communication points for senior management to understand the business implications of the technical decisions being made during an implementation? How to handle and absorb the risk around what we've come to call the impedance mismatch between two-phase commit and single-phase commit in some core banking systems that we've encountered during integrations in the past, and making sure the businesses involved are aware of where the risk lies in those cases and what they need to do from both an operational, business and technical perspective to make sure those risks are fully understood and managed appropriately. So we don't really know how much progress we're going to make towards that goal in the coming PI. It all depends how much resource we can find and how much willing contribution we can find. Although there's been a significant amount of thought leadership so far. One final thing that we'd really like to achieve this PI, and this is possibly a small low-hanging fruit that we might be able to tick off quite quickly in the next PI, is to think about rebranding what we call the Moduloop SDK scheme adapter. So that particular component has been around for 4 or 5 years, since a convening in Johannesburg, where I presented the first very early version of that, one of those convenings. New features and capabilities have been added to that consistently and pretty rapidly over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's no longer really a software library or a software development kit. So the term SDK scheme adapter doesn't necessarily fit with what that product does, its rationale, its reason for being. So we've given some thought to how we might rename that, rebrand it within the code base. So when we talk about it, it makes more sense and people understand from its name what job it does in the integration process. We've had some suggestions. Moduloop connector is the leading one right now. We think that's the best description we've heard so far. But if anybody has any suggestions, please post them on Slack or in the chat. We might have to have a poll to decide what to call that. But we do want to rebrand it just to avoid some confusion, I think, going forward. And as I said before, that does seem to be very popular as an integration platform right now. Certainly the most popular we're seeing in the ecosystem. So the thought leadership we've had this previous PI and PI 24 has been excellent and outstanding. So thank you to those individuals who've contributed. We've made significant progress in understanding the broad scope of what we're trying to do here to remove those barriers and lower the energy and effort and cost and risk requirements for people to come and join Moduloop schemes. It's very, very important for our mission, our financial inclusion mission, and to fostering that vibrant, viable business ecosystem around Moduloop and those broader goals of what we're trying to achieve. So thank you very much, everybody that's participated. Your time and effort spent on this work stream is massively impactful. Please, if you want to get involved in what we're doing here, feel free to come and reach out. We'll take contributions in thought leadership, requirements gathering, anybody who has product knowledge or experience, anybody who has system integration knowledge or experience and wants to come and join, be part of that ecosystem, or understand how you can build a business model around helping people integrate into Moduloop schemes. Please come and talk to us on this work stream. It's what we do, what we think about all the time. We have regular calls. Every week we have one sync up call. We maintain documentation, call notes, and all the requirements that we've been trying to produce, and the backlog that we have been growing in GitHub and ZenHub. It's all there if you want to come and take a look. Please feel free.